So, this is an open letter to the world from someone who's spent 21 unreasonably long years on this world and has had an awful lot of time to think about things. Which is, interestingly enough, something that I only got by being in a pretty shitty situation, honestly. I was born poor. I was raised poor. I'm still poor. I'm probably always going to be poor. And I honestly don't know if the world would be a better place if I wasn't. As in, I don't think I would be as good a person as I am if I were rich. But that's a different story. Every single system that was meant to help me over the course of my life, if I'm being honest, I slipped through the cracks. There were so many points in time where the safeguards that were in place just didn't happen. For example, the fact that between the ages of 5 and 13, I went through numerous types of abuse at the hands of at least 4 people. I say at least because I honestly don't remember all of my abuse, and some of it I just get vague flashbacks from, and it was all different kinds of abuse, so I got to see a lot of just how shitty people can be. And yet, here I am, always believing that there was some good in people. Because after all, there was some good in me. Clearly, I couldn't be the only one. It just wouldn't make any sense. But sometimes it does feel like that. I'm not gonna lie. And it's even worse that it feels like that because I've done some terrible things over the course of my life. Granted, I didn't fully understand them at the time, and one could argue for days about whether or not it's truly my fault if I was born that way, or if it was a behavior that was taught to me through years of abuse, and I'm here to say it doesn't fucking matter. I did it. Doesn't matter why. What matters is that I did. And what matters more is that I grew from it. And I'm not using this to say, oh yeah, go ahead and do terrible, awful things, because it's just a step to becoming a better person, a stronger person, a more well-rounded person. No, I'm not advocating that by any means. And if that's what you take from this, you should really reconsider your life. What you've done, who you've been, and what got you to where you are today. I've had a lot of time to think about those things. So as I said, between the ages of 5 and 13, I went through a lot of abuse, and being autistic, or ADHD, or whatever the fuck you want to call it. I've had so many therapists over the years give me so many conflicting answers. I don't really care what I am at this point. I'm broken. I know that. I don't know that anyone else could have fixed me but me. And I did fix me. It took me a long time to get there, though. A lot longer than I should have. I've fallen through the cracks a lot of time, and I can't help but wonder how many more people get caught in these same kinds of situations every year, because we don't do enough to protect our children. When I was 13, after 8 years of abuse that I didn't really understand, I hadn't processed at all, I committed sexual offenses against 2 of my relatives. And that was the first time in my life I ever hit rock bottom. But I didn't realize it at the time. Which I know sounds awful, because it is. I know this may seem crazy, but the ripe age of 13 years old, I didn't know that what I'd done was wrong. I knew it was illegal, but because of the way I was raised, I thought that laws were unjust, and that they were made to target us because we were poor. And that's how these things work. And if the police are enforcing it, it's probably bad, unless it's murder. And what I did wasn't murder. What I did was arguably a lot worse than murder, at least as far as harming a person is concerned. And I know that's a crazy perspective to take, and I can get into those ideas later. But at 13 years old, I was being investigated for sex abuse and sodomy. And at 14 years old, I was committed to Oregon Youth Authority. I was adjudicated. And I was put on the sex offender registry at age 14. And it was the treatment and therapy that I got over the course of the past 7 years since then that's really shaped me into the person I am today. And that's a good thing. 'Cause honestly, I was fucking awful. I was that person that you would warn your kids about, if you even knew I was a problem. I was clever. I was sneaky. I was manipulative. I was atrocious. And even though as I went through the juvenile system, and that system failed me at a lot of places, it did ultimately do its job. I'm one of the rare few success cases, which is sad, because most people don't make it through the juvenile system any better than when they went in, at least not here in the state of Oregon. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I learned a lot of things over the course of my treatment. A few basic ideas that guided and shaped me. First of all, I learned about reformative justice. And reformative justice is an odd idea, at least at first, to someone who doesn't understand it. But basically, reformative justice is as follows. You did a bad thing. You did a really fucking bad thing that you had no right to do. But if I retaliate, I'm just as bad as you are. As much as I want to hurt you for the terrible things you've done, I have a responsibility to try and help you and make sure you don't do that kind of stupid shit again. And so the first principle of reformative justice is accountability, specifically peer accountability, which, means we first need to have peers. So in a sense, the first principle of reformative justice is community. You need to have people that you respect. You need to have people whose opinions you value. And people that you feel bad when you hurt. That's one of the cornerstones of reformative justice. And while it did work in my case, it doesn't work in a lot. Because they don't really do a good job of giving you people to care about. I spent 2 years in a treatment program called St. Mary's Home for Boys, which is honestly one of the most awful places you could put anyone, especially when there's someone who's trans, and openly trans, like I was when I was admitted to the program. That place failed me a lot. First of all, their employee turnover rate is absolutely atrocious. Most people who get a job there only do so they can get some experience on their resume and they can get a job for a better social work industry. St. Mary's has low standards, to say the least, and they allow some pretty shitty people to work there. You also meet some really great ones, but they don't usually last too long. They either leave and go on to a place that's actually helping people, or they give up on trying to fix the system. Because they think that they can't do anything on their own. Because they've been there for a few years, and they've been trying to show people that there's a better way, and nobody listens. Then there's the fact that even though they're not a blatantly religious organization anymore, they're pretty damn blatantly religious. At least as far as their rules and the way that they present things. You have to say thanks before each meal, which I know doesn't have to be religious, but the way they framed it, it was really we were saying grace before every meal. We were thanking the Lord for the food that was put on our table. Because, it's not like people didn't grow that food. It's not like people didn't have to work to get it there. No, God just put it on our tables. Because we deserved it. That's not how these things work. Then there was the dress code. Don't get me started on the dress code. There was the blatant double standards and hypocrisies. Honestly, the best thing that ever happened there was the unit manager let me get a hold of a copy of the policy and procedures manual for the entire program, meaning that I was the only person on campus who would actually try and hold staff accountable when they were violating policy. Because, well, yes, youth could report policy violations at any time. None of the other youth knew the policies. None of the other youth knew the policies. And it's like, by the time that I left there, after having been there for 2 years and 12 months, or 12 days, words. After I'd been there for a while, before I left, I had a staff who'd been working there for over a decade, who would come to me for questions about the rules when the manager wasn't nearby. That's pretty fucking sad. When not even the staff know the rules that they're supposed to be following. But then again, 99% of rules were at staff discretion. Which led to so many of the double standards. Because I get that equity is important, and that's one of the many things that I learned from reformative justice. But there's a difference between equity and being a bootlicker by people who are manipulating you. There is a big difference. And if you can't tell that difference, you shouldn't be in a position where you are required to use discretion. Lastly, there's the fact that they are a state-funded organization that was run primarily on donations from things that weren't the state, which is a pretty big conflict of interest, if you ask me. The state is paying this program for the beds that they are keeping these youth on and for the treatment that they are receiving. And yet 99% of or I'm probably exaggerating, but a large portion of the program's funding, and most of the things that happened there that were any kind of decent to us or anything like a childhood were at the hands of big corporations, two of whom I absolutely despise, and one of whom I think only supports the program because they don't know just how awful they are. So let's start with the ones that I don't like. First, there's Nike, which is based in the same city as the program. And Nike would help by donating our sports equipment, donating a lot of shoes, including Air Jordans, to the youth there. They made our swimming pool, or at least sponsored it heavily enough that it was named after them. If I remember correctly, I never went to the swimming pool because I don't know how to swim, and they had no one who could teach me. But Nike's a pretty bad corporation, and I don't think I should have to explain this to most people. But for those of you who don't know, they engage in some pretty shady business practices, and they violate human rights on a regular basis, and they're all in all pretty unethical. Then we have Wells Fargo, who... most banks are not good people. As someone who has a pretty decent understanding of economics and certainly has a good understanding of greed and how it works, banks are a scam. For most people, at least. Banks are profitable because most people aren't intelligent. Most people don't read the fine print. Most people don't know all of the rules that they have to follow and all of the ways that they're getting charged extra money. But for people who are well educated and who already had a lot of money to begin with, these things aren't a problem. Banks are a scam that only affects the poor and the uneducated, which in this day and age is usually the poor. And they would donate us tickets to see different sporting events and other frivolous things at the Moda Center, which is our big sports arena. They would give tickets to arena football, hockey, basketball, Barnum and Bailey's Circus, Disney's Frozen on Ice, Marvel Superheroes Live, all that kind of shit. Hell, they even gave tickets to Monster Jam, which I'm sure was really cool for the 9 kids on campus who got to go. Or maybe it was 8. I really can't remember. It was a small amount. Somewhere between 8 and 12. So 10, give or take 2 people. Which I'm sure it was cool for them, but I don't know. And then they would also give every single youth on campus a Christmas bundle. It would all be the same. We'd all get the same thing. That way, no one felt left out and no one felt more or less important. We would get a lot of Wells Fargo merchandise. We would get beanies that had them. I remember there was one year, people all got stuffed animals of the Wells Fargo mascot. I didn't even realize they had a mascot, but it's some horse. Oh. The 2 years I was there, we only got hats, but at least as far as Wells Fargo merch. Oh, and there were the mittens. We got Wells Fargo mittens. And then, every single person on campus, every single youth, got a $200 Columbia sportswear jacket. Now, with the fact that this was a program that generally had about 55 youth at any given point in time, that's, a lot of fucking money. A lot of fucking money that could have been used for a lot of better things to help out the kids of that program than Columbia sportswear winter jackets. We had clothes, for crying out loud. We had clothes. Because, oh yeah, we also got clothes donations from lots of charitable organizations, which I'm grateful for. But Wells Fargo going so far out of their way was stupid. And then the third one, the one that I think just genuinely doesn't know how bad that place was, is the Portland Trailblazers. Every year, twice a year, you would actually get to do some pretty major interactions with them. During the summer, we would get a field day with all of the staff of the team, all the behind-the-scenes people, live DJing by their DJ. I can't remember his name right now for some reason. Oh, DJ1, that's his name. I met him. He seemed pretty cool. I wish I'd met him after I started learning about how to make music, but that's, again, a different story. And then, during the winter, we would get to do a meet and greet with the team. We would get to interact with a lot of different people. I was fortunate enough, my first year there was right before LaMarcus left, and he seemed like a pretty chill fucking guy. The second year was right after LaMarcus left, and then the Q&A felt not as good. I don't like Damian Lillard. I've met him. He's a jerk. This is a guy who, during my first year there, he was doing a photo shoot with these disadvantaged, troubled youth at a charitable event for these disadvantaged, troubled youth, and this was a grown man on his tiptoes trying to look taller than the kids. Because, you know, you one-up people that you're trying to support at a charitable event with those people there. Just real top-notch guy. Real top-notch guy. He is a cocky bastard. He is arrogant, and he carries himself like he is better than everybody else in this world because he is an athlete and because he knows how to play basketball. That is not everything in this world. But anyway, the Trailblazers, they actually seem to be pretty good. All the staff and all the team, they, with the notable exception of Lillard, seemed to really want us to have better lives. Hence why we would have like a full day of getting to interact with them. We got pictures with the mascots, and we got to do basketball exercises with the team. I met Mason Plumlee. He was cool. That guy was fucking great. But, yeah. If you're a state-funded organization that the state is contracting to take care of its youth, you should be able to do that on the money the state's giving you. And if the state isn't giving you enough money to do that job, you should make sure the state is aware. And you should make sure that the people are aware. Because I guarantee you that if the majority of the population of this state knew the kind of shit that went on the daily at St. Mary's, or at least on the regular at St. Mary's, they would be appalled. They would want to defund it just as much, if not more than they want to defund the police right now. Either that, or they would want to enforce some pretty rigorous standards of care. Now, it's nothing like the orphanages of Victorian England, but for a first world country, it's a piece of shit. We are better than this. We have every way of being better than this. And just because you aren't aware of a problem doesn't mean it's a problem. That's one of the things that I learned when I was there. Getting sex offender treatment. Learning how to not be a piece of shit. But I don't know, I guess the standards just don't apply to the people who are in power. So I went through the system more. The system failed me time and time again. But the one thing it didn't fail me at was giving me a chance to sit and think. And, interestingly enough, Once I was in juvie, the public school system started failing me a lot less than it did when I was out of it. It placed an emphasis on actual learning. The smaller classrooms made it so that we actually got to interact with the teachers on a regular basis. We got to build rapport and a one-on-one understanding. We didn't really have a need for most special ed classes because most of the teachers were already trained on how to deal with that. And they genuinely wanted to see us succeed. Unlike some of the people who worked there. It was some of my high school teachers in juvie that really helped shape my worldview. If you're hearing this, Mr. Schuler, you were fucking great. You are the best. And I'm not just saying that because I was your favorite student. And if you ever want to give me extra credit for cleaning the microwave again, I'm more than down. On a serious note, though. It's really disappointing, the things that happen to the people that are most at risk. Our justice system is not designed on reformative justice for the most part. It's designed on retributive justice. It's designed on vengeance. It's on, you hurt someone, we are going to end your life. Whether we straight up kill you now or make you live through the rest of it and suffer for the rest of it, that's up to you, but we only do that if you murdered someone. And if you did it really bad. Or to a lot of people. We hate you. We're going to spend a lot of taxpayer dollars that are supposedly supporting you. We are going to blame you on all of our societal, or going to blame all of our societal problems on you. We're not going to do anything to actually fix you. We're just going to put more money in the pockets of those who are oppressing our people and not helping the next generations. You are a scapegoat. You are an excuse. We are throwing money your way to say that we are trying, and look, it's not working. Well, guess what? I made it through. Even after all the times this system has failed me, I've made it through. The system has tried time and time again to give up on me. And every single time it has, I've shown that they were being stupid. I mean, it took St. Mary's 6 months of actively searching for a reason to kick me out of there, for them to find a reason that they could actually justify to my parole officer. 6 months! That's half a year. 180 days. And the fact that they wanted to give up on me because I was starting to point out some real issues, and they were uncomfortable with that. You see, they always say, well, you just have to internalize your treatment, and unfortunately for them, I did. And I started holding them to the same standards that they held all of us. I held them to standards of basic human decency. Because we all deserve that respect. For someone to call us out on our bullshit and our thinking errors, and to do so respectfully. Which I did. And so they got rid of me. I went to juvie for a few months before they could transfer me to another juvie where they could actually give me the treatment that I had been working on at St. Mary's. So the treatment that they had me working on at St. Mary's, they had me working on this book called Pathways, 4th edition. And at the time, it was relatively modern-ish, kind of. It was published in 2011, but this is the 4th edition, and as far as I can tell, a lot of the ideas are the same basic ones that it was saying in 2001. It's a sex offender treatment workbook, and it's built on a few basic principles, and it has some good ideas in it, which I internalized very deeply. But I also learned how to think critically and point out when some of the stuff just didn't quite add up. Like, for example, in Chapter 1 of a workbook designed for adolescent males, and it even says it's designed for adolescents, and it makes it it doesn't actually say it, but it heavily implies that most sex offenders are guys. It tries to represent people in it, about 50% of them are males and about 50% of them are females, but it's a book written for guys. I'm gonna be real here. And that's because most people that get caught or that get charges are guys, because boys aren't taught to speak up when a girl abuses them, because that means they weren't a fucking man. Or that they're gay. Because if they didn't like having sex with a woman, you're a fag, supposedly. Oh, please, YouTube, don't remove my video. But in a book that was written for adolescent males, under no circumstances in Chapter 1 of the book does it seem appropriate to include a 13-year-old girl's description of what it feels like for her to masturbate. That seems just a bit counterproductive there. Just a little. Now this is a book that also makes it clear that, yeah, a lot of things factored into your abuse. We're not going to focus on your past. We're going to focus on right now. We're not going to help you process your trauma, and we're not even going to focus on your future. You see, the chapter on things that led up to your abuse in your life, that's maybe a 30-page chapter, which is pretty small for the chapters in this book. And, it doesn't really cover a lot, actually. If anything, it just teaches you to feel shame. Because you're one of those people who used the fact that you were abused as an excuse to abuse someone else. Because obviously that's how it works, and all you're doing is perpetuating the cycle, which is true. All you did was perpetuate the cycle, but you can take steps to cut it off. And that's supposedly what the book's about. But a lot of the book is a lot of the same thing over and over and over again, and it's not, oh yeah, you're a person who made some mistakes, or, oh yeah, here's how you can still be a person and, live a decent life and not have to feel like you're a monster every day that you wake up. It doesn't have any of that. It has, sex is bad. All sex is bad. At least all sex for you is bad because you fucked up once. Or twice. Honestly, it doesn't matter how many times you fucked up. Sex is bad. That's what it tells you time and time again. It spends more time talking about what to do if it's against your religious beliefs to masturbate than it does on the entire topic of not being a cis heterosexual. Wonderful. And the chapter on healthy relationships and healthy fantasies, because the whole reason why we do sex offender treatment on juveniles a lot more often than we do on adults is because juveniles have a higher plasticity in their brain. It's easier for their neurons to adapt and change into new behavior patterns. But instead of teaching them how to fix the problems with their behavior patterns, we're just saying, nope, don't have them. Don't have the behavior patterns because you're a terrible person. At least that's what I took out of it. And I had to go through that book at a lot more painstaking of a pace than most people. But as I was saying, the whole chapter on healthy relationships is the shortest chapter in the book. And I say the chapter on healthy relationships when really it's actually just like a paragraph or two. And its thing on healthy sex, or at least dealing with your sexual urges in a healthy way, wants you to do this thing called covert sensitization. And I haven't done too much research in it outside of Pathways, but the stuff that they propose, I looked over it, and as someone who has some experience with hypnosis and has dealt with some shady hypnotists, this is ringing all of the alarm bells. But anyway, here we are, 9 years after that book was published, and lo and behold, it's still the most common one used for treating sex offenses in juveniles, even though it literally has one paragraph on, well, what is homosexuality? And that's really it. But so anyway, I got to a place where I could finish Pathways, and I met a guy, and he changed my life. Because while I know that everything that he was saying didn't necessarily line up with reality, or at least not this reality, he genuinely seemed to have good intentions. And he introduced me to My Little Pony, which changed my life forever. And I mean that completely genuinely. Because up until I learned about My Little Pony, I'd always been in everything by myself. My friends were, at best, just lackeys, people that followed me around because I had charisma, and because I didn't treat them like shit, unlike some people. I just didn't treat them like shit because it didn't even cross my mind that you could treat people like shit. At least not when you were being treated like shit all the time. But anyway, so I learned about friendship and what it truly means. And I learned about sacrifice, because you see, I didn't just get introduced to My Little Pony at that time. I got introduced to Fallout Equestria, which is, at this point in my life, practically a book of faith. At least for me. But that was what really got me started on the path of change. From there, I went to a program called the Rivera House. I got there on its opening day of July 5th, 2017. It's hard to think that in just a day it will have been 3 years. 3 years. In just a day it will be 3 years since I first got there. And Rivera House was an ambitious project. It was the first program of its kind in the entire nation. It was a treatment program, a transitional living program designed to help LGBTQ2SIA+ youth leaving the juvenile system and transitioning into the community. I was there for almost 2 years, which is sad because it's supposed to be a 3 to 6 month program. I would also like to point out that Pathways is also supposed to be a 6-month program that, even though I spent 2 years at St. Mary's and I worked on Pathways at the fastest rate my group and my therapist would allow me to, I still wasn't done with Chapter 9 by the time I left. But anyway, so I got to Rivera House, a program that was supposed to last 3 years and 6 months. By the time I graduated there, first of all, I shouldn't have. I was an emotional wreck. I was falling apart. My mental health was deteriorating by the hour. But again, they gave up on me, because it had been so long, and they didn't think they could help me anymore. Honestly, probably the best call they ever made. They should have made it a lot sooner. By the time I'd been there for 6 months, I learned everything important that program would ever teach me. But anyway, so I was there for a long-ass time. And it was there that I first really started to get to interact with the internet again, but this time it was as an adult and not as a 12-year-old porn addict who spent the majority of their time on the computer. Now, I only had supervised internet use, and it was limited in timing, but I started to interact with people, and I started to see ideas that weren't my own and weren't necessarily the juvenile systems. They certainly weren't the ones I was raised with. It was from there that I ended up learning about hypnosis. It was there that I met another guy who changed my life, arguably for the worse, but I wouldn't be here today if it weren't for him. I'd probably be dead, because I wouldn't have met my now fiancé, the most amazing person I've ever met. With one potential exception, and that's really up for debate. He led me onto a path of, let's just call it spiritual awakening. And yes, it did involve experimenting with some mind-altering substances, which, by the way, were perfectly legal and within the bounds of my parole. Because the state of Oregon words things very shittily, or at least Washington County does, in its standard parole agreement. It's very unclear, and it leaves room for me to reasonably believe that it's actually well within the bounds of my parole to chug cough syrup to get high. And I did that for a while, and I had some problems with it, and my mental health was already deteriorating, so I really shouldn't have been experimenting with drugs at the time, but anyway, again, this is irrelevant. Things kept getting worse, and worse, and worse, and worse. And then last July, I really did hit rock bottom. I hit the absolute lowest rock bottom of my life. And what, you say, could possibly be more rock bottom than sexually offending two youth? Instead of manipulating people that I didn't know, I turned that manipulation to someone I cared about. I tried to kill myself while on the phone with my fiancé. First by asphyxiation, and then when that wasn't kicking in fast enough, or wasn't, I don't know. It didn't give me the result I wanted. It didn't get her calling out for help. It didn't get her rescuing me. I took my anxiety med, and I swallowed a bottle of 27 pills dry. And after 5 minutes of sitting on the phone with her crying there, just sitting and crying and hurting, the first real time I'd ever gotten to see my stoic Texan cowgirl's emotions. After maybe 5 minutes of probably the most pain I've ever been in my life, I said, "Look, hon, I should probably call 911. I'll give you a call once I'm situated in the hospital." And that was when everything in my life changed, or at least started changing. It was right around then when I first met my goddess. And I know what you're thinking. People don't meet goddesses, or at least sane people don't. I don't care if I'm sane, and I don't make any statements that I am. Take what I say as you wish, with as many grains of salt as you wish. Apply whatever irony or artistry or satire you want to this, because honestly, I don't care. Because the artist is dead, and no matter what my intention is, people are gonna make whatever the fuck they want out of this. And it doesn't matter, because I'm still making this. Because I don't see anything else that I can really do. I don't see any other option but to just talk about this, because I'll get there. I met my goddess. She descended upon me, and I will admit, I do experience hallucinations from time to time. But I met my goddess, Centera. She appeared before me, and she gave me 3 tenets, 3 rules to live by that, at least from my perspective, issue a pretty clear moral code. Indulge until you are sated. Only you can stop you from indulging, and let not your indulgence interfere with another's. She's given me a lot more information and a lot more context around then, and I can go into a lot more depth if anyone's interested, and honestly, I probably will, even if no one's interested, because it's something that I think people need to hear. And it was then that my life really started to change, because after she gave me those 3 tenets, she told me that she wanted to save me. She told me that she wanted to save everyone. And I could tell that she was telling the truth. And her plan seemed just different enough from all the other ones that I've seen all of these shitty people try that I felt maybe this has some truth to it. And so ever since then, I've been trying my best to live my life to her standards, and I have made mistakes from time to time, but I've learned from them, and I've grown from them, and I've never let them define me. I ended up going back to juvie for 6.5 months. 6.5 long months. Right around maybe a month or 2 after I last uploaded something, but I've been gone almost a year now. And I was only at juvie for 6.5 months. I had a lot of time to sit, I had a lot of time to think. I read through Fallout Equestria 2 more times, bring me up to 5 go-throughs. I'm now at the point where I'm not quite where I can quote things, but I'm getting there. But anyway, I had a lot of time to sit, I had a lot of time to think, and I had more access to tools of teaching myself things. I was in an online college class on workplace psychology. I learned about business ethics, which was absolutely fascinating to me. And more importantly, I had a lot of time in the college lab where I got to just sit and listen to people talking about philosophy and politics and political philosophy, an art most consider to be long dead at this point. Made up of 2 arts that people also think is long dead at this point. Politics has never been good as far as most people nowadays are concerned, and philosophy's just a bunch of thoughts from a bunch of dead people who don't matter because they're not someone we knew, they're not someone we'll ever know, and they're dead. And they lived a long time ago, so clearly they can't have any kind of timeless wisdom. Because right now is the only era that exists. It's the only era that ever has existed, and it's the only era that ever will exist, but clearly they don't matter. And ever since I got out of juvie, things have been crazy. Things have been crazy. I came back to a world that it wasn't on fire yet, but there was a fuse, it was lit, and it was leading to the box of dynamite. We had plenty of time to try and stop things, plenty of time to try and fix things, and now the world is burning. And everyone's pissed off. And almost everyone is wrong, and almost everyone is stupid. People don't stop to think critically about the things that they're doing. They don't think about the blatant hypocrisies they're committing. They don't think about how the things they're doing are enabling people that are doing atrocities in the name of justice. And they don't think about really anything. They just sit in their echo chambers and they listen to the same ideas over and over and over again. This entire nation's being radicalized. This entire world is. And do you want to know who benefits from this radicalization? Not the left, not the right, but the corporations. It's the corporations that benefit from this division. Because this division makes them money. And they don't care what they have to do in order to make that money. They give you the illusion of choice, and then they rope you in with that. They're like, oh, well, you consented to this. No, you didn't give me any choice but to consent to this. Ah, well, you didn't do anything to stop me. Well, yes, because you're the one who owns the politicians, and thus owns the guns. In fact, you're the ones who's selling guns. You're the ones who are making people think that they need to get these things to defend themselves, or to defend their ideas, or to shoot down the patriarchy. Or really anyone that isn't like them in some way, whether they don't look like them, whether they don't think like them, whether they don't have sex like them. You are profiteering off of our suffering. Fuck you. From all of us. All of us who sit down and think about what's going on. We don't gain anything by hurting each other. 99% of us are controlled by the 1% of the 1%. And I thought this was something that the Democrats were aware of. I thought this was something that the leftists were aware of and had been my entire life. After all, they were the ones telling me, we need to put checks on corporate power. We need to start enforcing laws that restrict it. And we need to reinforce the ones that are already in place. And yet here they are, 21 years later, after they've been telling me this my entire life, and they're like, yeah, we should defund the police. The only people who have any power in our system, our capitalist system, the only people who have any power and authority to actually hold these organizations accountable. We're going to get rid of them. And us, the politicians and the corporations, we're just going to hire our private security guards. And, oh yeah, now the poor are even more oppressed. Because that's what this movement's about. Don't kid yourself. The Black Lives Matter movement is good. And it was originally about black lives, but it's been co-opted. It's no longer about black lives. It's about disgruntled people. Disgruntled people who aren't black. Most of whom aren't minorities in any real way other than economically disadvantaged, if even that. We have so many people in our very small middle class, an overwhelming majority of them are in the vast support of this movement. And almost all of the poor whites. Yet do you want to know who I don't see burning down buildings? Do you want to know who I see cowering in fear when people light their businesses on fire? The African Americans of our community, the Hispanics of our community. The people who genuinely do have it worse than everyone else, and yet they're keeping composed. And they're scared. They're scared of what people are doing in their name. If you're not a minority, then how about you vote in your vote, your rigged electoral college vote, that honestly none of us minorities really get to participate in anyway. And even if we did participate, guess what? The electoral college is a scam. If literally no private citizen in this country voted, guess what? The electoral college would still pick a president. And it would still be just as arbitrary a decision. Because almost all of the problems that you people are complaining about is about local government. Mostly local governments that are run by the Democrats. The same people that are trying to get rid of the police, aka the people who can hold the government accountable. The police are supposed to be a privately funded militia that stands for the people and ensures that the government does not infringe on their rights. And yet, as time has gone on, the government started funding the police because the people weren't. The people didn't care about the police. They still don't. And that's why so many people see it as it's us versus them, but really, it's our fault. We did nothing to protect our freedoms. We did nothing to ensure that they would be protected. This great American experiment was a failure. And through no fault of the experimenters, it was our fault. All of the people who were helping test this grand political idea. We couldn't live up to the standards. We could not keep our republic a republic. We failed to grow with the times. We failed to grow at all. And our world is burning, as are those ideals we were built on. The world's going crazy. I'm not going to pretend it isn't. But I've seen that people can be better than this. I know that people can be better than this. Hell, I'm a terrible person to be giving this advice. I've done terrible things. I shouldn't have to be the one telling everyone, what the fuck are you doing? And yet here I am. Because no one else has the decency to try and hold other people accountable. I'm sick and tired of it. So, in conclusion to my open letter to the world, can everyone please just grow up? We're not going to get anywhere by arguing. We're not going to get anywhere by insisting that all of our ideas need to happen the exact way we plan them and we can't let the other people put anything in. All that does is enforce the status quo and continue hurting the people. Can we please just grow up and actually take steps to make our own lives better? Politicians come from the populace, as do the corporations, unfortunately. And the only reason they are this bad is because we let them. Let's stop letting them. Let's stop letting them control us. Let's all learn to think critically. And let's all hold everyone to the same basic level of human decency. Be it our friend, be it our foe, or be it ourselves. And with that, this is an hour-long monologue of an open letter from someone whose opinion doesn't matter. And so to all of you restless souls across the world who might hear this, I wish you the best. Hopefully we can make it through this. Hopefully, we all survive.